Welcome back to the Celts Are Here podcast. It's the morning after what was a eventful and very successful night in a row at Fir Park as Celtic booked their place in the semi-final of the League Cup. I was going to say the Premier Sports Cup there, Quinny, but I know there's a whole rebrand and going on with Premier Sports with VAR Play, so it's very possible that by the time this semi-final against Kilmarnock, who Celtic's been drawn against, rolls around, it could be a brand new name. But we'll call it the Premier Sports Cup for just now. Celtic booked their place into that last night with a 4-0 victory over Motherwell. Goals from Reo Hatate with the brace. Reo Hatate with a sublime goal that we will get on to talk about. And Kyogo managing to get his first goal since August. So a lot to talk about in that, Quinny. But let's just go to one of the biggest talking points that we're going to get onto for the game on Saturday at Tynecastle. VAR has eventually arrived in Scottish football. We've heard so much about this. We've heard the arguments for it, the arguments against it, but it's here. We're going to need to use it, and it's going to be used at Tynecastle on Saturday. Just in terms of the technology, Quinny, before we go into the Scottish issues around VAR, which are obviously it is going to be. But what is your whole opinion on VAR? Because for someone like me who watches English football, I know you watch a lot of the European leagues. What is your experience of it being as just a kind of normal football punter?
Well, I think everyone can agree with the concept of we want more correct decisions than wrong. And that's where it all, I think, starts. And then I think from there is where everyone runs off in different directions. You know, like the English have actually been the worst for implementing VAR in like the world. Because like the thing I'm worried about with the Scottish implementation of it is that it's quite similar to the way England have tried to use it. And that is, we want to try and leave a game with no wrong decisions, and that's not the purpose of it. You know, like really, like goal line technology is the first like technology-based thing that's influenced, match decisions, from an official, and there's never been really an issue with that. I think there's maybe a ghost one right in the early year or something when it first came out, but beyond that, no one messes with goal line technology. Everyone agrees it's fantastic, does its job, and all the rest of it. And VAR should be like goal line technology. If the World Cup, when it was done very well, and then the remit it got right after that was like mistaken identity or clear red cards or, it's blatantly obvious things where you see in 2 seconds, like that is just wrong. That's a red or that's a pen or that wasn't him that should have been sent off. It was the other guy, that kind of thing. And in MLS in America, they actually do it the best. Like, honestly, like they actually go out their way to not use the thing. It's like, literally, if they can't see it in 3 seconds, 5 seconds, that it's like blatant, then they just move on. They just forget it. And because that's the way it's always been handled in America and Germany, and I think Spain can be quite funny for it sometimes, and Italy can be quite funny as well. But Germany and America in particular, it's very much like we're only going to come in and stop the blatant stuff, because it should be like goal line technology in that sense. So if that's how it's implemented, we're going to be massive beneficiaries of it because we get screwed out with so many blatants. It's unreal. But if it becomes the whole, we don't want to leave the match with a wrong decision, then it's going to be conjecture and speculation and opinion, and it's going to take 10 minutes out of games, and it's going to be brutal.
Yeah, you don't want that stop-start thing, but you see so much with VAR, and it can take up to 5 minutes to make a decision and stuff. You certainly don't want that, but I think you're right in the point, Quinny, and that leads us into VAR in a Scottish context where you do see Celtic get a lot of decisions against them. Celtic, over the years of watching different Celtic teams, are not a heavy tackling team. I've watched many a team go up against Celtic and put in heavy tackling last night. There was one I thought was a shocking challenge, and nothing, not even a yellow card. So it's interesting to see it brought in, but my biggest concern with it overall, Quinny, is that the same incompetent referees in Scotland who make decisions badly at this point are still going to be the same people that's looking at them. And I think many people would have actually argued that though VAR's a great step and it's good that it's getting introduced, that many people would have liked to have seen the refereeing standards go up first before we get the VAR. It's almost, with referees, it's almost running before you learn to walk type of thing, because many people still think that there's a inconsistency in refereeing performances, and that's across the board. I think of every team in probably the league, there's an inconsistency.
I think that's a great point you pick up because as you're saying that, like I'm getting wee flashbacks to. Did you see when the referee was on Sky Sports talking about, oh, we've signed a new player, VAR's our new player? Did you see that wee clip that went out?
Yep. Yeah.
You know, so I think maybe there might be an attitude within the Scottish refs or whatever, and this is just me speculating or conjecture or whatever, but maybe it's a shortcut to a better refereeing standard where it's like, you know, we'll let them go, but the blatant stuff, we can catch it and we won't get hammered for it, you know? And as I say, if it does, you know, that's the main thing for me with the VAR always, is it's just, if you want it to come into every decision, it's just wrong. It's just, that's not what anyone's up for, you know? And if they do treat it like a shortcut to improve refereeing standards, we don't want this to be like a driving test, you know, where every decision's, you know, they're getting called in and all that kind of stuff, you know.
And it's a game that is going to be used in that, you know, going to Tynecastle over the years, I'm fortunate enough to be going to Tynecastle on Saturday. Hearts, under whoever, usually like to put the boot in a good bit against Celtic, and it's going to be interesting because, again, even though the technology is there, Quinny, and we want it to be used properly, it's up to the referee at the end of the day to go and look at the decision. Even if there's a crowd of 10 Celtic players around him, he doesn't actually need to go and look at the screen if he doesn't think there's any issue with it, does he?
Yeah, so the way it works, most of the time across most countries is like the VAR office will shoot a message in saying like, listen, either it's a definitive, like that's a pen, just award it, or go and take a look at it. And unfortunately, the more go take a look at it shouts there are, is where all the problems become, you know. When we do go away to these stadiums, like the crowd can play a big part in it with different referees as well. If they're maybe like, you know,
certainly there, because you know what it's like with the stands, and it's, you know, you're really on top of the pitch and with decisions and stuff. I think there's probably been times that referees have played to the crowd, as in they've, you know, just taken a reaction of the crowd, I need to award the penalty or whatever else.
and like the crowd, and then like crowding, like players crowding around the ref. I think, like, and again, in every country I can think off the top of my head anyway that uses VAR, for the majority of the time now, like crowding the ref is proper a yellow card offence, you know. So like it is something that, as everyone's kind of teething through this, you know, even the refs, I don't know if we're hammering them, but we're being quite, you know, strict, quite straight in the line with what we think might happen or whatever. But with the players, like, they will really need to get in, like, so we don't want daft yellow cards for stuff and whatever, you know, as well. And maybe that element of like the player pressure, along with the fans, maybe it takes a wee bit out the ref, and then maybe some of these decisions that aren't actually even VAR related are maybe just a bit more actual impartial, perhaps.
Do you think with VAR there is greater accountability for Scottish referees at this point in time when it comes in?
Yeah, because it then like makes a proper like forum for discussion. Why didn't VAR chin this? You know, because if it's a ref, you need to have the best camera angle to see exactly where he was standing, where he was looking at that exact frame when the tackle came in or whatever. But with VAR, they're watching everything at all times. So with these decisions, that they're all under the spotlight, because it's, well, why didn't you flag that? Why didn't you pull that one?
Yeah, I was watching, I think it's actually the same clip that you're talking about with Sky Sports, Quinny, and Crawford Allen, who's the top man with the referees, was talking about teething issues and maybe early issues during its tenure. And I think for a lot of Celtic fans, they will find it quite ironic that, you know, our first game under VAR in Scottish football, and it's going to be Stevie McLean in charge of it, who is, of course, the man in the line in the semi-final of the Scottish Cup, who denied a clear penalty when he was watching it. And there's been nothing, there's never been an apology about that, and never an explanation of how he never seen that. And I think for anybody, you know, you're talking about refereeing positions there, that was one wee step forward with Scottish football years ago when they were putting referees behind the goal. And remember that? But yet he still couldn't spot a handball.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Flashbacks.
And he's the man in charge of the VAR at the weekend for Celtic, Stephen McLean.
And again, there's always going to be teething issues with this, right? And see, when they get done in the World Cup, what a lot of people kind of forget when they use the World Cup as an example is the World Cup was like every best referee in the world was the team, you know? And in every country, for the most part, when they've implemented this, the top division is like the last to get it. You know, they'll either run it in the cup as a trial. I think some of them have maybe ran it in some like playoff matches and other kind of things like that, you know, to get the teething issues out the way, whether it be technologically, just make sure everything's actually synced up and working and you can actually utilize it. Because there has been times before, can't remember when or where, but like the system wasn't working and they couldn't tell the ref. And by that time, 10 minutes of play had happened and it was unretrievable, you know. So anyway, you know, I think That's one of my main risks, is that we're just going straight into the league with this. And because initially we were speaking about it at the beginning of the season, it was meant to be a thing that came in halfway through, and it was like, oh, then everyone's played everyone once, and then it came back.
I think it was after the World Cup. It was just meant to come in.
Yeah, and I don't think we're quite at that point yet. We've not played Hearts yet this year, off the top of my head, have we? Or have we actually?
Yeah, we have. We beat them 2-0 at Celtic Park.
Oh, of course. Yeah. So if we play, has everyone played everyone once? Are we at that stage yet? How many games have played? 10. There we are. Oh,
yeah,
played 11.
Well, actually, if the game against Livingston hadn't been postponed, we would have, but we didn't. So that's the only one, I think, off the top of my head.
Okay, well, it's hard to really grudge at that, I suppose. That's unusual circumstances. But yeah, I suppose by and large, if everyone has played each other once rather than, what it was already, I suppose that's not too bad. I actually thought it was just like I don't know why, I thought we were on like game 8 or something of the season. It feels weird in that sense. Just for the competitions that we're playing, but we're on 10 games already, man. 11 at the weekend. Third of the season.
Yeah, it's it does go quite quickly, and it is strange that we've got this situation where the World Cup is and whatever else, because you probably wouldn't be at this pace maybe by games, but it is what it is. But we can only speculate at this point in time with VAR. I'm sure we'll be on next week. We'll be talking about it. We hope we're not talking about it too much. Actually, I don't want it to become the thing that you're taking away from each game. I want to be walking away from a game talking about a good Celtic performance like there was last night.
Yep.
And not, a referee missing a decision, a referee not looking at a decision, or whatever else. So we'll move on from VAR on that. I thought it was quite important that we just touched on that because, it's Scottish football. It gets knocked a lot of times, and it's right that we take this step forward with the technology. Although I would still like to see referees in Scotland go professional, Quinny, go full time, and look to see a better level of consistency from them, from whatever they interpret. In games you'll see yellow cards being given for challenges that are kind of nothing challenges, and then you see things be let go, and I don't ever really get that. If you're going to book somebody for one thing, you need to book the same person if they do the exact same. So that's what I'd like to see, but hey ho, it is what it is.
It'll be interesting.
Will be interesting. Just while we're on, we want to pay tribute to Frank McGarvey. It was good to see him out on the pitch on Saturday before the game against Hibs. It was very fitting that a man who is a member of the 100 Goals Club at Celtic was joined by another. And the word legend is actually, I think, misunderused a bit. I was listening to John Hughes Jr. on Axom yesterday. He was talking about the actual meaning of the word legend, and it's somebody that's memorable and whatever else. And Frank McGarvey's certainly that for anybody who was growing up in the 80s, certainly for my dad's generation. That iconic header in the 1985 Scottish Cup final, and his career stats, Quinny, are absolutely phenomenal. 245 appearances, 113 goals for Celtic. That's some return. And what was a very competitive level of Scottish football. If you think about Scottish football in that early 80s, a decent Celtic side under Billy McNeil and then Davy Hay, and obviously Aberdeen, Dundee United, really competitive. So, yep, our best wishes and strength to Frank at this really difficult time. But we are thinking about him and all his family. So, on to another Celtic legend, Quinny, and I'm going to call him that. I think he's well worthy of the title now. There's one behind me there. His new book's just come out in Callum McGregor. I'm not getting, unfortunately, paid to put that there, but I thought it looked quite nice with the old captain's armband there. I'm sure he'll be joining Scott Brown and Jamesy Forrest in that category. But James Forrest, I said last week on here, I'm going to take it for getting the call right that Forrest would start at the weekend. Did I think he would score a hat-trick? No, I didn't. I know somebody who put it on as a bet, and they won over about 500 quid, so fair play to them on that. But nice. Yeah, really nice way to seal 100 goals for Celtic, Quinny, and fair play to him.
Yeah, absolutely. If your pal won 500 quid, they must have put on like 5 pence or something, because the odds on that must have been crazy. but no, it was a great shout, and like, I didn't see him getting a hat-trick either. And I kind of thought, again, here on this podcast, we've been quite open to what James Forrest, who he is and what he can be for us.
I think you've described him, Quinn, as a useful player, which I think's, a fair comment on it, because for the past 2 or 3 seasons, he's been a squad player, and that's been it. He's not been someone who's started, whether that's due to injury, due to his age, but, he's not old in terms of a football player. He's only 31.
Yeah, totally. And I think part of the problem he's had over the last few years is it's been like he's always under pressure to get fit and try and break into the team. Whereas under Postecoglou, I think he very much knows his role in the pecking order, and he's just buzzing just to do what he can when he can. And he didn't do anything significant in some of the matches he's featured prior to the weekend, but he has looked nippy, he has looked lively. He doesn't look like he's going to let you down in like the last 10 minutes of a league match or even in a cup or something like that. And that's a fantastic position for us to be in for like the 7th choice forward in the team. Like it's brilliant. But the problem is like when you're putting pressure on him to be the number 1 guy, and then obviously hat-trick at the weekend is phenomenal, but he's not going to do that every week. And then that's when the pressure comes, and then it's like, is he European level, is he Champions League group stage level? And like effective for 5 minutes into a game or something. But again, I think it seems like he's very happy at the club. He's very settled, and it's not a negative in terms of like where he is in the pecking order or whatever, because he knows he's here through and through. Some of these guys will leave, he'll still be here, and it's just about picking your battles and waiting for your moments. And to come into a game like that from the out in the cold, being in the club since he was 12 on that big contract, and some people would get disillusioned and spit the dummy and not try as hard in training, knowing, I'm not playing for the next 3 weeks or whatever. But you put him in there the day, and he looks 5 years younger. Not the day, the weekend. He looked like, Brendan Rodgers Forrest.
Yeah, Brendan Rodgers Forrest, indeed. When you look at it, but we've spoken about, it's going to be something that we come on to talk about in terms of the squad and players getting up to speed. And he did come out the cold. He's not played a lot of football. I think it was 4 appearances or something. And even I thought when he came on against RB Leipzig, he looked much more lively. And I think one of the criticisms towards Celtic in the Champions League this season, if you can call it a criticism, because the manager's been quite open about saying this, as we are inexperienced at that level. And when you're inexperienced, just sometimes you need a couple of old heads. And, when he came on, he's been there, Quinny. He's done it 100 times, scoring for Celtic, not in the Champions League, unfortunately. But, he's played multiple times in the Champions League, multiple times in Europa League. He's scored in both competitions. And he is reliable when you do need to turn to him. And he continually gets written off. And he comes back. And last season, 2 big moments that, he was rightfully credited for, coming on against St Johnstone in the League Cup semi-final, scores the goal, and which was a really stuffy game. And obviously all the emotion that had gone around that with Betty Old just passing a couple of days before it. And then the goal at Livingston, an away ground where we'd struggled so much. It was 2-1. He pops up with the third, and it's game over. 2 big moments last season. And, I know a lot of people said when he was given the contract, why is Celtic giving him that? But see if he produces 2 big moments a season until that contract runs down, I'll be quite happy. And if Saturday was one of them, absolutely fine.
Yeah, brilliant. And like you say, you only need him to pay off like that a couple of times a year, and he's been very useful to the campaign. He's been very beneficial to the team. And, with some players, we all expect players, particularly like fast wingers, we all expect them to kind of peak late 20s, early 30s. But I was having a similar conversation with somebody, in fact, about Craig Gordon, in a sense, because he had a bit of a patch out of his career in the middle, and he's still kind of playing down.
When he was at Sunderland,
yeah, just for a bad injury, and then he's kind of playing on a wee bit longer towards the end. And Forrest has had like a spell of injuries over the last 10 years that have kept him out for 3 months, or for 6 months, or for 2 months, or for a week, or whatever. And again, I think now he doesn't have the same pressure as like, I need to get into the team, or I'm not going to get a contract, or I need to get into the team, or I'll get sold to somebody I don't want to play for, or whatever. And he knows that the manager values him. The manager's got a place in the squad for him, and he will get his chance to come in and do his thing. Then I think this might be like the peak years for somebody like him. Like he's been in this league, never mind like the European stuff. It's phenomenal that, because Abada was, I'm sure it was Abada, but Abada was, I'm sure it was Abada against Leipzig. I just felt like he was a wee bit just blinded by the lights almost.
Yeah, and he's a young, lad still. I think that's the thing we all forget with Leo Abada. I think he's 21, or he's 20. Yeah. So, at that level, we spoke about this quite in depth last week, if you remember right, when we spoke about Celtic players, having to take the scalps probably this season to get better and improve in this competition. And Abada's one of those. But you've got a guy like James Forrest in the background who's been there, who's done it. It's perfect for a young lad like that to try and, and they're all really interested to listen to Josip Juranovic the other day, who said that Forrest was one of the first guys to welcome him to the club, which now Juranovic admitted to doing with Alexander Bernabe when he arrived. So, it's
Lovely.
passing that down and setting those standards, which Ange Postecoglou is determined to get right. And that's about the culture that's around the football club. And it's why we experienced success last season and hope to do so once again this season.
Yeah, completely. And if we can keep this, because again, these moments, we spoke about it before, but these little moments for guys like Forrest and even Giakoumakis with his goals and Abada getting the goals last night, the more happy people in the squad, you must imagine what those training sessions are like now, man, when they're all fit and available, when they're all scoring and they're all nipping.
It was funny, Postecoglou got asked last night, about leaving Forrest at the team, and he just said, I just avoided him. So there must be people really pushing to get into that team now, which is fantastic. You need that.
Totally, man. And, Forrest only helps but lift that because, again, Abada's been phenomenal and Maeda's obviously been substandard. But Forrest, he's still chapping to get in the team. I'm talking about him being happy in his place in the squad, but it's not as if he's just going to be putting his feet up. He still wants to do it, but he knows there's people in front of him and whatever. But when you've got Maeda and Abada then coming into training and whoever else, and you've got Forrest there who's been clocking in and clocking out for his whole life basically at the team, and that he's there. It's a great training outlet for these guys as well for when it is into the league, Hearts away, you better watch this with the pitch, or this left back is like this or whatever, because he's bloody played everywhere and played against everyone at this point, so it's the environment I think is going to be key for us, because part of the thing that we've all been and I think this was another thing we're going to go on to anyway, but part of the thing that's happened over the last few weeks with some of the missed chances or whatever is it is just fine margins. And as we get into this crunch period where the 2 European games, we got that cup game out of the way last night, which was great, and a couple of the league matches, that the fine margins of just putting the ball in the net, it is going to be the difference of everyone who gets there on match day is buzzing and pulling in the same direction. The recovery and the build up, the training's been excellent, and the standards for every position, picking the team must be getting on impossible when they're all fit now with the form that even the backups are showing,
I think also Quinny, 6-1 at the weekend. I don't think Lee Johnson could have prepared for the team he was going to face, and that's something that's going to play to our strength at this point in time, because you're talking about players pushing for their chance in the team, and when you look at it, last night I expected Ralston and Bernabe to continue on in fullback. In comes Taylor and Juranovic. Midfield went unchanged apart from Haksabanovic going into the forward line. And when you look at it overall, it's such a great strength to have, because when you've got players who are pretty much I think I would still be one who says Juranovic is their first choice right back, but Ralston's good enough to get game time, and he's good enough against any team in the league. And when you've got that strength, it must be bloody nigh on impossible for any team to prepare for facing us, because Robbie Nielsen will be looking at us on Saturday and thinking, what teams are going to play here? Is it going to be Bernabe and Ralston, or is it going to be Taylor and Juranovic? Is it going to be Haksabanovic on the left-hand side? Is it going to play the 10? How do I prepare for this? And you're going to need to go through so many different situations. And the manager, I remember at the start of the season talking about, he was asked about other teams paying looking at him and finding out about his system, and he'd said at line, they usually don't pay attention. And if you're preparing a team to play Celtic at this point in time, I don't know how you prepare to play against Celtic at this point in time, especially in the league.
No, it's because all these different players offer completely different dimensions, and we've spoke about Mooy over the last couple of weeks. Bernabe, I think, but Bernabe, I've seen a lot of people talking about, I think it was after the game of the weekend, a lot of people were like, oh, Bernabe is going to be the number one left back now, he's looking like he's stepping up, he's getting much better this and much better that. Bernabe's fantastic, right? Big fan. I think he's got a really high ceiling. But the main difference, the main positive you get from Bernabe now versus Taylor is his final ball. When he gets into the final 18 yards, and it's not that Greg Taylor's isn't great, but Greg Taylor, unfortunately, over the season so far, he's not really clocked many, if any, assists. A lot of his crosses aren't beating the first man, or he's just maybe not getting to the box quite as much as he did.
Which a lot of folk would say, because he's basically playing like another midfielder, whereas I think Bernabe's a much more direct fullback. And it's I used to love Emilio Izaguirre when he first came to Celtic, because I remember one of my first Derby games, him bombing down that left-hand side, and he whips that ball in for Gary Hooper, and it's just kind of almost vintage Celtic, could you say, Quinny? You know, the left back getting the ball, or the other full back on the other side, driving down, getting the ball across, and I was getting joy for it. And I think that's something that Giakoumakis especially really suits. Both of them seem to have a good wee partnership going. Obviously, the goal up at St Johnstone, and he does it again at the weekend. But it's the standards in the team are fantastic at this point in time. And you know, going back to that St Mirren game, there was so much came out of it with people saying Celtic squad's not where they actually think it is, and whatever else. You're now seeing the fruits of a squad that are up to speed, have got game time into their legs, and they are ready to go.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like, those comments are always going to come when the results are sticky or whatever, when we don't have full strength. Because again, we're talking about this now over the last 3 games. No Jota, no McGregor, you know, who are cornerstones of this best of what you would imagine to be the best team, you know.
Carl Starfelt too.
And Starfelt, yeah, sure. I actually think Jens has probably put Starfelt down on the food chain now, to be honest. But yeah, Starfelt last season, you wouldn't imagine we would have signed somebody to replace him because him and Vickers had such a great partnership. But yeah, so like, how do you prepare to play Celtic? Well, it's I think the midfield probably tells its own story. I think that's probably the easiest part in terms of pick. You know, I think he probably will stick with, because the league's important. The cup last night was important, right? But the 2 games in the Champions League, you don't get another shot at that, you know, until like next year, sort of thing. So I think you'll want that midfield to be. And I think they looked great over the last couple of games, but I think you'll just want to keep that momentum. We want to play the hot hand. You want to keep those guys getting 60,
Aaron Mooy's
minutes.
been fantastic in midfield. Sorry to jump in on that one, Quinny, but what's been your thoughts on him? 2 assists at the weekend. I thought he looked brilliant last night. He's just a really classy midfielder. I like the way he drags the ball, and it's just, I think he's a real top quality player in there. And you're starting to see, you know, what a good signing he was in addition to the squad.
I think he does. I think he does the same. I think he does as well at that job as we've seen O'Reilly do to this point. But the main difference is Mooy's been playing for another 10 years, and he's played at some different stages, and he's, you know, learned a trick or 2 along the way, kind of thing. So I've been very impressed with Mooy. You know, I was quite impressed with him. Not the first game or 2 he came on. I thought he looked a wee bit kind of out of place, but he's slowly kind of getting up to speed and getting into the pace and really fitting into the team. And the range of passing he has, short and long, that we spoke about before, having that in the final third with the pace of Abada, with the bravery and the willingness of like Giakoumakis, and then some of these other guys running around as well that are clever and can play in tight positions. Like, it's a great weapon to have. And we've seen that from O'Reilly at the beginning of the season. And then there was a wee period when McGregor went out that we kind of lost a bit of attack at O'Reilly. And it's been really nice to see him and Mooy kind of complement each other in that respect, that they're both quite physical. And, you know, O'Reilly's taking that kind of deeper role and playing, you know, the metronome.
Yeah, the metronome, the pivot, whatever you want to call it. But when you look at it, I think you're right there. But Mooy and O'Reilly, they do complement each other much, much better. And I do prefer Aaron Mooy being that wee bit more advanced, if you will, because O'Reilly's playing that pivot role. I think that's important to the speed and intensity that Celtic play at. He's not going to be able to replace Callum McGregor in there. He's not going to probably dictate games like Callum McGregor will. But Mooy's pretty much doing that job from that wee forward rolling. You know, last night, when there was a ball through to Kyogo, which is absolutely first class, and it's he should have scored. You know the one I'm talking about when he goes 1-on-1 with the goalie. Not the absolute sitter with the cross in from Abada, but the one that he goes 1-on-1 with the goalie, and there was no right for Aaron Mooy to pick him out with the pass.
It was brilliant,
and
man.
You know, if Kyogo gets back up to his scoring best, those two are going to have a field day, because Kyogo will make the runs and Aaron Mooy will pick him out with the passes.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think that midfield is pretty much kind of set in stone because of the form they're showing, and you want to just keep enhancing that, because, like, you know, Shakhtar next, that's a 6-pointer, as we know, before we even think about going into the last game.
It could be a curveball though if, say, Jota returns for maybe Shakhtar, and you could possibly see Haksabanovic drop into that midfield.
Well, I think, right, if we do have Jota, I think Jota and Haxa go front 3 with Kyogo or GG centre of them. I think that's maybe because Haksabanovic looked great in that position that we've seen Mooy do over the last couple of weeks, because he's a bit more agile, he's a bit braver, and he's maybe just a bit more determined to really stamp on the match, if you know what I mean. Like, he'll really he'll even come deep and get it and really drive up the pitch and take a man out of the game.
Always shown for the ball, Haksabanovic.
Yeah. But having him and Jota doing that on the final line when we've got this midfield support and like a good striker, I think that might be like the front three for Europe potentially. So, yeah, you're right. There's a curveball to be had here for the weekend, and that's where Robbie Neilson will have a headache, and that's where I'm having a headache over it. But I think the manager, because that midfield three, Hatate really kind of foils all this really well. I thought in terms of last night, like we were talking before coming on, like I'm a huge fan of Hatate. I'm probably I'm a huge Hatate fan. But like the last 4 games or something like that, he's been so frustrating to watch because I was explaining this. I was down watching the game last night with my family, as I was saying to your uncle and that. Shout out to Robert and Diggsy if they're listening. But we were talking about Hatate, and we were saying like it looks like he's always in slow motion when he's in the middle of the pitch, particularly at Celtic Park. He's doing the right thing. He's trying to be strong. He's being clever. But he's just like, and it's as if he's like surprised that someone's tackling him, you know, sometimes, you know, and that's when you kind of like, oh, come on, Reo, just do it. And then, but in every match almost to this point, he gets 1 or 2 moments where he's quicker than the opposition and he gets that gap and he runs into the space and he finds the pass and he's just different gravy, you know, and having that kind of, you know, physical, cool, calm and collected O'Reilly and Mooy, and then you've got him perhaps a bit more free to just find the wee spot where he wants to go into slow motion, where he's got time and space in the final third. It's a really nice kind of balance that midfield's got at the moment.
Yeah, I think you could possibly describe him as a wee bit of a showman sometimes with some of the tricks and skills that he has.
Yes.
In midfield, much like yourself, Quinn, I'm a big fan of him. And I always try and remind people whenever they maybe whatever dig at him, that, you know, he's only been playing professional football for 2 years, which is incredible to think with the way that the system works in Japan. He came out the university side at 22, 24 at this point in time. So he's only been playing for 2 years. You know, the Champions League's a brand new world to him. You know, against guys like Luka Modric and whatever else. So he's another one who's only going to improve. And while we're talking about him, you know, Liam Kelly has a family. What a goal that is from Reo Hatate. It is absolutely filthy, that goal.
Oh, it was lovely, man. And, you know, the thing about, see every worldie, or I don't know if you'd call that a worldie, right? But see every like great goal that Hatate scored, see the look on his face, man. You just love it. I absolutely just love to see it. He's just like, yes. He just bleeds it. And yeah, slick feet, cool, calm and collected. Liam Kelly does have a family, and today they are mourning his soul after that. But yeah, sublime goal.
And it was a dead ball. You know, it looked as if the chance was gone. Haksabanovic kept it in, passes it into him. You know, but we're talking about I'm being sometimes surprised that people are tackling with him. But you know, it was like a John McGinn thing. Backs the Motherwell defender off. Goes round Kelly with that wee drag back and bang right into the back of the net. Absolutely sublime goal.
Yeah, that was brilliant, man. And again, I don't know why he's still got a blue mouth guard. I don't know how we can't get him a green one.
Be green. We need to get him a green one. I understand the mouth guard. I absolutely understand that because he takes some bangs to the faces, yes.
He gets tons of them, man.
It's either that or maybe, you know, his national team wear blue. I don't know maybe if that's maybe something to possibly do with it. But
the national team's blue samurai, that's what they call themselves.
That's right. So yeah. Hajime Moriyasu, if you're listening, he probably isn't. Start putting Reo Hatate out. Give him a chance. Because he's still been left out in the cold there. But again, maybe that's in his thinking that he's only been playing, you know, for 2 years and he needs to give him that chance to really get a grip of professional football. And he's going to do that under Ange Postecoglou. He's going to develop into a real star player for Celtic, Reo Hatate.
Yeah, because his pace as well, and as much as I'm saying sometimes, like I've got wee flashbacks in my head to watching him, you know, this season, but like, especially since we played Real Madrid, again, we spoke about this at the time, but it does really feel that he did take a schooling off him in a good way, sharing the pitch with a guy like that and going for 50-50s with him and seeing how he moves across the middle of the pitch with the ball. And it feels like, you know, he has really, like in that match, like really studied the master, a Ballon d'Or winner, you know, up close and personal. But he's developing it, and it's those moments where it does pay off for him. We get that goal, but it's sometimes, you know, he's still, you know, cutting his teeth in that respect. You're very correct to bring that up in terms of how long he's been playing for. Just because that is completely different in Japan. And as well, in Japan, like before he came to us, like I was one of the people, I'd seen a bit of him in Japan before coming. He played some left back, he played some left wing, you know, he did play midfield.
Was he described as a versatility player when he signed for Celtic? Do you remember that?
It was like he could play anywhere, he can do all this, he can do all that. And some of the games where he doesn't look that great, before the kind of emergence, I suppose, of Taylor and the signing of Bernabe, I was like, do you know, I could see why he's a left back. You know, I could get why people have played him there, you know. And I thought maybe that might have been a route he's went down, but it's like, no, he's playing midfield and he's going in. And having somebody that's got that kind of pace, and that's what Haksabanovic gives you in the centre of the pitch, is having pace right in the middle that can take the ball from deep and take 10, 15 yards out the picture in 2 seconds. It's a huge weapon.
Yeah, it's a huge weapon, and long may it continue. He likes Tynecastle. Remember that screamer he scored there? So
Got 2 goals that night, didn't he?
One. Big Jacko with another one, remember? Yeah, just to win that absolute rocket.
Yeah, another one. It was maybe Kyogo, I can't remember.
And it was, I remember when he see when the ball left his foot, I thought that's going right into the back of the net pass, because there's absolutely no chance he's getting to that. And, you know, big moments like that. And he's becoming a bit of a big moment player, especially in the league. Hatate. And again, you know, look at the impact he made. And it must have been difficult for him coming over here from Japan, trying to assimilate into a squad that was already halfway through their season. Hard enough at the start of their season. Comes in, that goal at Tynecastle, the 2 in the derby game. Looking at this season, the goal against Motherwell that wins you the game. He does come up with big moments, Reo Hatate, and I think he's a cracking player. And, you know, going back to that, coming and assimilating into the squad, coming in so late in January when you're halfway through a season after already playing a season, that's why guys like Forrest in and around the building are important, because Celtic lost a lot of experience in what we still regard as the rebuild after Neil Lennon departed the club under Ange. And we still had Callum McGregor obviously in the building at that point in time. The Beaton's still there, Tommy Rodgick's still there. We bring in a guy like Joe Hart, who obviously had a wealth of experience. But, you know, Beaton, Rodgick's have left it, and Rodgick have left the building now. So it's important you've got that homegrown aspect in your dressing room that sets standards and cultural standards. And you can actually see, I think it's the one against Rangers, remembering Forrest and Hatate sitting on the bench, and Forrest is nudging him saying, "You get man of the match," and he's looking up as if to see me. So yeah, I like that. I think that is great, and it's important that there's guys round and about that. I just, when we were on Forrest, just to finish on him, this is a great stat, Quinny. You know, looking at his numbers, fantastic, but in the quadruple treble seasons, James Forrest, 154 appearances for Celtic and 49 goals. That is a huge contribution to what you would deem as the second most successful period in Celtic's history, after the Lions in the first line under Jokstein. And, you know, for me, he is a Celtic legend. He has 49 appearances off 500. And there's only 13 men to do that in the club's history. And if you think about the players that played for the club over many, many years, and he's joining guys like Billy McNeil and Paul McStay and Roy Aitken, in that category, which is phenomenal. Tommy Burns is another one. I've actually got the list here, try and get it up. So joining them, to score over 100 goals for Celtic is a fantastic achievement. And you were talking about his fitness levels and everything he does and hard work. If you look at and compare, for talking sakes, his former teammate Lee Griffiths' career, how both have went, Forrest is kept at a level that, you know, he's able to come in out the cold, as you described it, for Celtic at the weekend and perform and produce, because not everybody, you know, does it and keeps herself at such a great level. So it's going to be interesting. I think at this point in time, he is Celtic's 4th most successful player and is likely to take over Scott Brown as 3rd. And by doing so, wouldn't be very far off the tails of Billy McNeil. So he's really, you know, in terms of honours and everything he's achieved, it's quite incredible. Yeah, here's this 500 club here. It's Billy McNeil, Paul McStay, Roy Aitken, Danny McGrain, Pat Bonner, Alan McNair, Scott Brown, Bobby Lennox, Bobby Evans, Jimmy McMenemy, Jimmy Johnson and Tommy Burns. So another 49 appearances to go, and he would join that 500 club. Quite spectacular.
Some list that. He's definitely well on his way to being a legend. And like, as you're talking there, I'm thinking, throughout my lifetime, probably the only 2 guys that I could think of when they retire, outside of like Henrik Larsson, of course, maybe somebody else like that, but would be sung about the same way that I hear songs, and I've grown up with songs. They gave us Johnston, Tully, you know, all these people. I love them, know who they are. I've never seen them play football. Who would, in 20 years from now, you know, who would be like the old, remember back when we had, you know, this and that? It would be McGregor and it'd be Forrest, you know, the homegrown guys that have been here, like, and, you know, let's see how it does pan out and it's all said and done. But guys that should be lifers, and guys that quadruple trebles, you know, appearances and goals coming out their ears and medals and everything. You know, they are us. They are the fan on the pitch, you know, kind of thing. And I think we've kind of stumbled into this wee situation. We spoke about it before, where some of our foreigners are kind of like that. in a roundabout way. Like, I remember in a Hatate interview or quote earlier this season talking about he was like 6 years old and he remembers watching Nakamura score against Man United, and Giacomakis talking about how we always watch Samaras and that kind of, so I think some of the guys we've picked up, like, when everyone signs for a club, they go, "Oh, I always used to love Nottingham Forest," or "I've always been a Brentford fan my whole life." And it's like, we actually have guys that have a decent claim to say they understood a bit of the club before they got here, and then when they get in the deep end, they're just like I said with Hatate, they just bleed it. They know what they're here for, and they know what the club's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forrest and McGregor.
Yeah, they certainly do. While we're talking about recruitment and everything else that goes between that, the managers came out to say that his January plans are well underway, praising up Mark Lawwell in those comments, Quinny. For me, the biggest thing to come out of that, which I think is going to be important, no matter what happens against Shakhtar and Real Madrid in these two remaining Champions League games, and whether we're in Europe after Christmas, whoever has been identified as a target still needs to come in January. We can't, I don't want to say we never stop, but it is that in the transfer market. We need to be relentless in our approach to improving the squad and setting the standards and getting better each time. And that's been something that we've not done. I go back to January 2020 when we had that last 32 game against Copenhagen in the Europa League. Do you remember who we brought in that January window?
Ooh, 2 players before Copenhagen. No.
Patrick Klimala and Ismaila Soro.
Oh, wow.
So, when you had that task to go,
story.
No disrespect to the guys, but when it tells a story that they both come in as raw talents, and you can't be bringing in raw talents when you need to look forward to a last 32 Europa League, because we want to see Celtic advance. So would you agree in that, Quinny, that no matter whether Celtic's in or out of Europe, if they've been identified, get them in?
Completely. So I can't imagine for the life of me what they're trying to bring in at this point. What needs such preparation? Because the squad is like 2 to a position now, maybe 3 in some cases, depending on.
But is it even improving each position and bringing in somebody who's just another level above that?
But that's what's exciting. Is that what they're doing? Are we going to go? Is it like, is it go and spend 10 million quid on somebody or 6 million quid on somebody, or whatever, and go and get a proper upgrade?
I mean, we've been talking about James Forrest at great depth and his standing as a Celtic player, but many people will say if you look at the right wing, you've got a young lad in Abada, he got his brace last night, but he's still developing, and then you've got the old head in James Forrest, who we know of, as we said, has had issues with injuries. So, one of them drops out, you're starting to become a wee bit short just now. I think that was the reason at the weekend it was becoming short. I certainly think another striker we're going to bring in just because we've only got 2. I've not bought into this stuff about an experienced striker for the Champions League. I think both just needed a bit of a chance to perform at this level. But I think that's a position Celtic might look to bring in. Certainly another attacking player. Maybe I shouldn't say a striker because we know Ange likes versatility. Maybe someone who can play as a winger and through the middle.
Yeah. I think there may be some preemptive business, but I think another striker, I think he wanted to keep Ajeti on his third man and just have him in the background. I don't think he was really up for that, or maybe on 2 big wages to do that.
You see his goal against Sturm Graz last night? Decent finish.
He's doing good. And I think with Griffiths, when he very first came in, he was open to that opportunity with Lee Griffiths until he became, until Ange seen, this guy's a bad apple or whatever. So I think, third striker is definitely something that they would be keen on, but that may be more in that prospect position, where it is like we're going back to Argentina to get an 18-year-old, or we're going to Japan to pick up a 21-year-old, or Belgium or something like that. I don't know. So that could be exciting and fun. But as we're just thinking, like I'm looking at the team that played last night, like Juranovic is expected to be a World Cup sale probably, right? And I think if we're still in Europe after Christmas, we probably keep Juranovic till the summer, because I don't think he's in any great rush. I think he quite likes being at Celtic and being the main man at right back and playing Champions League, and he's still getting called up for his national team. But I think if an offer comes in, he'll probably be quite happy to go all the same. So I think another right back is probably on the agenda. And then outside of that, like, I really struggle to think, where would you spend like 5 million quid on somebody?
That's an interesting point with Jura, because there will be a day when all the guys that have came in will likely depart, but we don't know when that'll be. I would like to think that we could keep the crux of the squad for a good wee while, but we do know that the manager likes to forward plan. He basically forward planned with Beaton and Rogic, with O'Reilly coming in, and I think Ideguchi was the forward planning and Beaton. It was not quite worked out as it is, but you could see him forward planning with that. Interesting one in Juranovic because he's going to likely play feature for Croatia, and if he does have a good World Cup, there'll be even more attention and people sniffing in and around him. Possibly a midfielder. I wouldn't be surprised if he is bringing another midfielder, just due to maybe the attacking options that you've got in there, Quinny, could you say? Possibly bringing another midfielder, possibly another striker. And I think the other position will be another centre-back, just due to the fact that if one does have an injury, like Carl Starfield has at this point in time, you've only got 3, and it doesn't really allow you a lot of options for rotation or a backup.
Yeah. I was even thinking, would you spend £7 million tomorrow on a goalkeeper? If the right one was available, if you're Ange and you're like, that's the goalkeeper for me, would you go and spend £7 million on one now?
It's an interesting one because Joe Hart's brought so much to the club since his arrival, and there's plenty of life left in him. But he's the first to admit he's not sweeper keeper, or whatever you want to describe it as, and that could be one that you look at and think, right, maybe we need somebody that is a bit better to the system, and Joe can still be in and around the building. That could be one. But what about you? But would you do that?
Because I just think some of their, like you're saying, the midfielder there, and I really like you say, Ideguchi's still knocking about. McCarthy still gets minutes, whether that's right or wrong, it's another discussion. Abelgard, McGregor's injured, like Haksabanovic can play midfield. We've got, I think midfield, unless someone leaves, I think midfield is quite well kind of taken care of at this point, perhaps. So I just look at the team, I think, yeah, maybe a 5th centre-back, but, how much money are you going to spend on a 5th centre-back? If we do have a transfer kit, if we do sell someone and get a lot of money in, where's the real upgrade to be had in this team? Is it maybe get the next Jota kind of thing? Because I know he's got a big contract, but again, it depends on how these things go. I got a message from somebody, as you mentioned, I kind of involve myself in a lot of other football as well. But Diego Jota being injured for Portugal, I got a message from a few people saying Jota for the World Cup. So, I wouldn't rule anything out at this stage. You never know. But maybe we go and try and get another elite kind of, for lack of a better term, wonder kid type guy from a Benfica or something.
Yeah, and it's good that Celtic's in that market and looking at it. But it's interesting, mention the goalkeeper one as and I don't want to sell Joe Hart at this point in time because I'm quite fond of the big guy. I think he's did a good job since coming in, but it's one where there could be, we know the manager needs to be ruthless. I mean, he's planning for the future. With Joe Hart said he's not going to be here forever, and if the right person's there for the right price, maybe that could be one that the manager looks at. So really, really interesting in terms of that. It's exciting to look forward to, and it's good once again that Celtic are saying we're going to be active in this market in January. How many times before Ange arrived had we seen next to nothing happen in January?
Yeah, because it is like you say, we need to kind of strike while the iron's hot. There's always caution and trepidation when it comes to January. Like, we don't know what's happening for next year yet, and we're going to sell somebody in the summer, and it's always been cautious. Whereas in football nowadays,
have the replacement in January before you sell somebody in the summer. Is the point I think you're trying to make, Quinny, especially like Jura, whoever it is.
Yeah, you need to bring them in beforehand. That's the way football works now. Is that you can't be reactive. You need to have 2 to a position, and then when one moves or one gets injured, you're sorted. And it feels like the manager and some of these other backroom staff are much more in that kind of modern way of thinking. And that's hopefully the way that we're operating now.
Yeah, so we'll see who comes in. That's just my kind of gut feeling. Centre half, midfielder, and a attacking player. So we'll see. It could only be one of those guys. It might be 4. You never know. We'll just see. But that just builds into looking after the World Cup at squad rotation and having a squad that you can have faith in, and that's something now where you can see the seamless transition, that we're not worrying when somebody drops out to bring somebody else in, and it works. And I think possibly at St Mirren, people were saying, he should never make 6 changes to his team again. He made a hell of a lot of changes from the weekend once again, and going into the weekend after the Leipzig game, and looking at the bigger picture overall. Possibly, Quinny, the game against St Mirren just over a month ago now, maybe Ange Postecoglou thought the squad was at the level it is now then, and it just wasn't, and that's why we get caught cold or whatever. Do you think that's a possibility?
I totally agree with you. I think we're kind of at the stage now where like we kind of maybe all speculated, anticipated, we do have 2 sets of 11s, you know, and it feels like we're now starting to get into that pattern where, like, I think Giakoumakis starts against Hearts, for example. I think there's a great shout that Bernabei and Ralston come in against Hearts.
To keep Taylor and Juranovic fresh for next Tuesday against Shakhtar?
I think there's a midweek operation and a weekend operation now almost, you know. So Kyogo played last night. I thought personally it would have been Giakoumakis, and then you would get Kyogo back in for the weekend and Kyogo to go there. But the man in Shakhtar. But I think the manager's very much midweek and weekend, and there will be like 4 pieces that change, 5 pieces. And then the other guys that don't change, they're the guys that tend to get subbed at 65, 70 minutes to keep everything ticking over and fresh for the most part. So I think if you remember back to the beginning of the season, we never really changed from the best 11. It was just kept playing the best team, who's scoring, who's playing, who's firing. Yeah. And then we get into that period where that wee sticky patch we just had, where we're starting to play midweeks now as well. And then some guys are injured and some guys aren't on form, and it all looks a wee bit haywire and all over the place. But with last night, I think, and then obviously how good the weekend was, I think that's us now kind of settled into midweek and weekend operation for the next maybe month, you know.
And I've got that bit of rhythm. You know, I'm looking at October here in my calendar in front of me. Kicked off the month for that win against Motherwell that we needed coming back. And then disappointing in the Champions League against RB Leipzig. We all know that. But the late goal up at St Johnstone, the doing of Hibs, looking at his last 8, scoring 4 goals. That was our first clean sheet in 9 games, which I think is important to the back line. And obviously the goalkeeper had changed, but I'll do Moritz Jensen, big CCV, the world are good. But it's an interesting point you make on midweek operation going into the weekend. And it's, you know, taking out his goals from the weekend. Not one player started last night that had scored any of the 6 at the weekend between, you know, 5 goals between Forrest and Giakoumakis. But I think both will start at Tynecastle. Yeah. And again, you then take Leo Hatate out, who scored 2 goals last night, but I don't see him starting at Tynecastle.
I'm going to just throw into this as well. I've just had a look through the teams. So, like, Stephen Welsh throughout October has played more than Jens and Carter Vickers, I think, or maybe on par with. Right. So through this period when we have been doing that adjusting, like the injuries have not just been in like to McGregor and Jota, but the defence was also, Vickers was out for a bit, Jens was out for a bit, you know. So there's just been so many, like, just, bugger, that's happened this week as well. It's just maybe made it a bit kind of thing. So maybe that's what the manager means, is sometimes people don't always pay attention. But I kind of thought from the weekend, like, because again, when you look at maybe changing 6 players for like a midweek to weekend kind of thing that we're talking about, you might think of it as like a set, like the defence or the forward line or something. But I think the manager sees, or I kind of see now, Abada, Giakoumakis and Bernabei as a set, you know.
That's interesting.
In terms of, like, you know, in terms of how they come together. I know Abada.
Yeah, no, I actually get that. Maybe Haksabanovic into that mix. I think he complements anybody, really, doesn't he?
Yeah. But last night it was with Kyogo through the middle, so then it's a bit of a different dynamic. That's why Taylor's in, because something else is happening somewhere else in the pitch. But I think if we get Giakoumakis, we're maybe going to be likely to get Bernabei and Abada on a regular basis, because the deliveries, and Forrest as well, his sort of deliveries for Giakoumakis being the arrowhead has been very good. And if we can get that consistency throughout the team, then I think it just enhances the squad, all this stuff as well, you know.
Absolutely. And I think even Aaron Mooy and James Forrest is a pairing that seem to complement each other. I spoke about Aaron Mooy's passing range with Kyogo earlier on. And again, you know, Forrest will make runs and look for the ball inside. And Aaron Mooy, if he picks him out, 9 times out of 10, you're very likely that James Forrest will put the ball in the back of the net. So it's nice. I think that's a really good point that you make there. Going to be Bernabei, Abada and Giakoumakis. But at the weekend, you're probably going to go into it. And I would imagine even after scoring 2 goals last night, that Abada won't start at the weekend, which talks about the depth and the trust that the manager has in his different players. I think Forrest, Jacko, and it'll be Haxa as the front three at the weekend with the same midfield that we saw last night. Probably the same 2 centre halves, change the 2 fullbacks and bring Joe Hart back into goal. You agree with that?
Yeah, that's what I would go. That's what I think will happen. I personally would keep in Taylor and Juranovic just leading up to Shakhtar, but I think there's a solid chance Ralston and Bernabei come in for this one.
Yeah, I think there's a great possibility that happens. Just due to that, I think that link up, especially you've spoken about maybe Bernabei and Jacko, and there's a nice balance actually between Bernabei and Ralston. You know, Bernabei likes to get forward, and Ralston's very much a defender first, attacker second. Even though he did like a goal for Celtic last season, scored that cracking goal in the first day of the season at Tynecastle, if you remember that one, right? But it's great that we've got that rotation in the squad, and I think now winning 2 games back to back is something we've not did for a wee while. You'd need to think back when I probably couldn't remember. It must be the game leading into the game against Rangers, Ross County in the Cup, then the
Yeah.
Derby game. That be
Yep.
right?
It looks like it, yeah. Red and yep, that's the last time we
And
strung together. We
yeah,
were on
and
again at that time as well, but we were doing everyone.
yeah, and just looking at it, the Champions League's probably zapped us a wee bit in terms of the league form, which is absolutely fine. I thought it was funny the other day when Andrews basically asked, about being in the Champions League and just pretend we're not there type of thing and just take hammers off teams. It's good that Celtic said it's good we've had this experience this season, but it's always going to be domestic football as the main objective, and it's nice to get into that wee rhythm. And it's nice to see Celtic have those 2 wins back to back, and you've got a really good chance to go and make it 3 wins in a row against Hearts at the weekend.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree. I think momentum's so important for this team when we have just been like hitting the post and just missing by 2 inches and whatever. Like form momentum.
We love a bit of rhythm, don't we? Me and you, metronome with Callum McGregor in midfield and rhythm in the team.
I think probably just looking at the team again, the only question mark I do have is the right wing position. Like Maeda's coming out and giving quotes saying Ange's like his dad and stuff. Abada's on amazing form, and Forrest just bagged a hat-trick at the weekend. And Jota maybe gets 30 minutes to the weekend. Maybe he's the curveball. Maybe he starts to warm up and then gets half time.
I certainly think you'd like him available for Shakhtar at Celtic Park. I certainly think you'd like Jota back for that game.
So I think the right wing, or maybe the final piece of the front three, I think Haksabanovic and Giacomakis start, but the third element, whoever that is, or who, I think that's maybe the last piece I'm not sure about.
Daizen Maeda, though, you've mentioned his name. I know we're drawn towards the end of this, but he made the 4th goal last night, and it's good to see this back from him. You and I have been 2 people who have championed him and try to be very balanced on him. His birthday today, so happy birthday to Daizen.
Right.
And after that home game against Leipzig, remember when you spoke about the reaction that he'd got afterwards. Looked much more lively at the weekends. Came on, scored a great goal, great pick out from Aaron Mooy, and then last night made the 4th goal. And he made the 4th goal by doing what he's best at, being aggressive, going and winning the ball back, and it leads to Abada hitting the post and Kyogo getting in there with the goal. So much more of that hopefully to come from Daizen Maeda.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's like, I just want to say on that point, that was a great assist from Abada to hit the ball off the post so he could pass it to Kyogo. That was just genius. So well done, Abada, for that. But Maeda, anything that any of the Celtic forwards, any of the chances that they're finishing, I don't know. I don't think Maeda is incapable of scoring these goals or laying these chances on for other people. He's just been so unfortunate. And I said it on one of those, and I've been putting some pieces out on TikTok and a few other places, but see if you watch Giacomakis and Maeda when they're playing together, I really don't think Maeda likes Giacomakis that much in terms of how stroppy he gets when they kind of run in for the same ball or someone doesn't square it perfectly. I think everyone kind of, like Giacomakis is fine. I don't think it's like ill will, if you know what I mean. But you know how sometimes you just work with somebody and you can't be bored with them sometimes. I get that kind of vibe of a Daizen when he's playing with Gigi. So, and again, I just think it's just a wee kind of circumstance of a few elements have went against him. But as we've seen with Kyogo, like I was listening to people slating Kyogo for the last couple of weeks because he's not scored. And it's like Kyogo's like one of our best players, undoubtedly. And Maeda, is not too far off that. And the only thing he needs to do to change anyone's opinion on that is just 2% better than what he's been doing. It's not huge gaps. It's, be a bit calmer in the shot, make the run a bit better times,
And do what you're good at. I love him when he goes and presses a ball, but it was at times kind of in his performances where he was just kind of hesitating. I thought, what are you doing? Go and do what you're best at. Go in the hand of the player. Because he's a guy out of all the forwards at Celtic that I would really hate to play against if I was a defender, because you don't get him in his piece when he's playing against you, and you want to see him with that aggressiveness and going at players once again.
Especially maybe even like a pitch like Tynecastle will suit him as well, because he could cover every blade of grass on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably bring it in by a few inches for the game. And also, on that, good for Kyogo to get that goal. He's a guy, spoke about the team thriving in rhythm. He's a guy that certainly thrives in rhythm, and that'll do him the world of good getting that goal.
Yeah, see the long shot but it hit the cross, I was just like, oh my god, man, that should have went in. I felt, and then the chance you referenced earlier, like I felt, it's like, oh come on, son, you can do it. Come on, you're so close. But again, like I think he's been struggling under this pressure of like, if I don't score, Giakoumakis is going to get in. And maybe now that we have settled into this weekend, and it's just my kind of speculation at this point, is that we'll see how the team works out on Saturday. But this weekend in midweek rhythm, it's a wee bit less competitive pressure for losing the number one air quotes spot. And hopefully now we just start to find the rhythm, because I did feel that there was a period of games there where Giakoumakis and Kyogo and a lot of other ones, they were just snatching at chances because they knew, if I don't score, I'm getting dropped next week. And that kind of was a wee bit detrimental for a while. And it feels like that's kind of now subsided, and we're now getting just like confidence is returning.
Confidence is returning. Absolutely. Good note to end on, Quinny. We'll be back after Celtic take on Hearts in the league. We'll probably be on just after we play Shakhtar next week. Hopefully we're talking about a Celtic victory eventually in the Champions League. Thanks to everyone who listens to us on a regular basis on the podcast. Myself and Quinny are enjoying it. It's good to go on and talk Celtic for an hour, and we try and remain as balanced as possible and give our opinions and our insights into what we see happening on the park and even off it with, our wee chat earlier on, Quinny, on recruitment and whatnot at Celtic. Please, if you haven't done so already, do like the video, subscribe to the channel. I've plenty of content coming over the next few months. Even as we go into the World Cup, we've got some exciting plans going into that. So thanks for listening, and Quinny and all our listeners, have a great day, and cheers for listening to the Celts Are Here podcast.
Here we go.